Financial statements are like blood test and pathology reports for a doctor. अगर डॉक्टर जब तक वो पढ़ नहीं सकता तो ट्रीटमेंट कैसे करेगा? Debt can be a fantastic thing. मेरे पास दो rules हैं. Anyone who borrows and gets into trouble is because they violated one or the other rule.
What are those two rules?
मेरा एक मंत्रा है, less is bad, more is worse. You should first understand how much do you need. उससे कम डालोगे तो प्रॉब्लम में आओगे, ज्यादा डालोगे तो भी प्रॉब्लम में आओगे.
दोनों तरह से मारेंगे.
हाँ.
मैंने देखा है बैलेंस शीट में एक और वर्ड बहुत रेकरेंट तरीके से आता रहता है, which is goodwill. Goodwill का मतलब क्या होता है? Because पर्सनल लाइफ में तो समझ गए कि गुडविल क्या है. Is goodwill always good? Bad?
Goodwill is always bad.
Okay.
Let's put it this way.
Let's start with that.
You right now, I can see, must be having huge goodwill in your organization. But if you prepare a personal balance sheet, how will you put goodwill over there? You can't. But tomorrow, if your organization, somebody says, "Arey, Arunima is doing a great job. I want to hire Arunima or take her and pay your company some amount." तो वो goodwill उनको मिलेगी और जिसने दी है उसकी बैलेंस शीट में आएगी.
Negative cash conversion cycle भी मैंने देखा है in companies like D-Mart. What they do is that they take money upfront and suppliers को बाद में पे करते हैं. As a result of that, they have a certain lead time.
सुपरमार्केट का मॉडल ही वो है, जो भी खरीदते हैं क्रेडिट पे खरीदते हैं और कस्टमर ऑन द वे आउट कैश देके जाता है. बट इट कैन लीड टू सिवियर प्रॉब्लम अनलेस फाइनेंस मैनेजमेंट इज गुड. देयर वाज अ कंपनी कॉल्ड सुभिक्षा, got into deep trouble, finished precisely due to this reason.
Another key metric that investors often use is return on capital employed. उस पे what is your take and
That's the ultimate test.
अच्छा.
कितना पैसा डाला, कितना कमाया, ultimate test वही है.
One interesting thing जो आपने mention किया था, which was financial mismanagement.
हाँ जी.
And ये बहुत बार companies के downfall का main reason होता है.
95% से ज्यादा दुनिया में
Right.
the businesses that fail, they fail due to financial mismanagement.
Now, as someone who has just entered the stock market and हमें समझना है कि कंपनी में मिसमैनेजमेंट के चांसेस क्या है, तो हमें क्या ढूंढना चाहिए बैलेंस शीट में?
The biggest reason for business failure due to financial mismanagement is
Dr. Anil Lamba, thank you so much for joining us at Money Talks by Grow. You're a true champion of financial literacy and इस पॉडकास्ट के थ्रू हम कोशिश कर रहे हैं उसी कॉज को आगे बढ़ाएं.
So nice. That's music to my ears because I've been doing this for a long, long time. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I know आपने कई books लिखे हैं on key financial concepts and one of them is titled Romancing the Balance Sheet. Another one we'll be speaking about very soon. So audience members, please stay tuned. But financial statements, खासकर balance sheet को समझना कोई भी investor के लिए इतना जरूरी क्यों है?
Balance sheet and सारी financial statements समझना जरूरी है because they tell you कि बिजनेस में क्या हो रहा है, आपका बिजनेस कहाँ जा रहा है, और अगर आप उसको कंट्रोल करना चाहते हो then you have to know this. Many companies come to know they are in trouble after trouble has happened. But the whole trick lies in the ability to preempt the trouble. So financial statements are like blood test and pathology reports for a doctor.
Right.
अगर डॉक्टर जब तक वो पढ़ नहीं सकता तो ट्रीटमेंट कैसे करेगा?
Now, अगर बैलेंस शीट को ही देखें, let's break it down into the two main parts, which are assets and liabilities. Liabilities में debt is of course a main component, and debt सुन के ही ना पैनिक मोड में काफी लोग आ जाते हैं because debt intuitively लगता है कि एक बुरी चीज है. From a company point of view, उनको कब debt raise करना चाहिए, and is debt always a bad thing? How much debt is too much debt? I know lots of questions. We can take it one by one.
You said डेट देख के लोग डर जाते हैं. ये डर तभी होता है जब आपको समझ नहीं आता कुछ. डेट कैन बी वन ऑफ द बेस्ट थिंग्स इन अ बैलेंस शीट. एक तो सबसे सस्ता पैसा डेट है, सबसे महंगा पैसा इक्विटी है. आपको ग्रो करना है, अगर अपने ही पैसे से ग्रो करोगे तो एक लिमिट पे आके you'll hit a ceiling. But if you supplement your money with borrowed money, तो your growth can be much, much more. There is, let's say, debt for productive purposes and debt for unproductive purposes. Unproductive के लिए कभी मत लेना डेट. पर्सनल लाइफ में देखा जाए तो किसी को हॉलिडे पे जाना है, वो डेट लेके जा रहा है, या घर में शादी करवानी है, डेट बिल्कुल नहीं. Do it within your means. तो मेरे पास दो रूल्स हैं. Anyone who borrows and gets into trouble is because they violated one or the other rule. अगर ये दो रूल वायलेट नहीं करोगे, the more you borrow, the more you will prosper.
What are those two rules?
Earnings should be greater than cost and inflow should happen
बिफोर आउट
before outflow has to happen on account of repayment of debt.
दूसरे साइड पे आते हैं, विच
जी।
इज अबाउट एसेट्स. कोई भी कंपनी के फंडामेंटल्स को समझने के लिए व्हाट आर थिंग्स दैट वी शुड नो अबाउट द एसेट सेक्शन?
The assets are need based. First thing the entrepreneur has to do is to understand what do you need to run your business well. So broadly assets will be divided into fixed and current assets. Proportion kitna fixed kitna current will vary depending on your nature of activity. Manufacturing company के पास बड़े ज्यादा फिक्स्ड एसेट्स हो सकते हैं और किसी और सर्विस इंडस्ट्री के पास ज्यादा करंट एसेट्स हो सकते हैं. मेरा एक मंत्रा है, लेस इज बैड, मोर इज वर्स.
Less is bad, more is worse.
More is worse.
Okay.
And therefore, you said how much you should invest. You should first understand how much do you need. उससे कम लोगे डालोगे तो प्रॉब्लम में आओगे, ज्यादा डालोगे तो भी प्रॉब्लम में आओगे.
दोनों तरफ से मारे गए.
हाँ, तो you should understand the optimum amount of money to be invested in assets.
लिक्विडेशन पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से एसेट्स के बारे में क्या ध्यान में रखना चाहिए?
अगर लिक्विडेशन होता है तो जो करंट एसेट्स हैं उसकी कितना रियलाइज कर पाओगे थोड़ा सा क्वेश्चनेबल हो जाता है. तो नॉर्मली फिक्स्ड एसेट्स ही काम आते हैं. लिक्विडेशन मींस यू आर यूजुअली हैविंग अ डिस्ट्रेस काइंड ऑफ अ सेल, and distress sale hoga to the assets may not fetch even equal to the book value, so you'll get a certain percentage of it.
Got it. तो आप पूरा अमाउंट भी रिकवर नहीं
But we should all become financially intelligent, तो liquidation की नौबत ही नहीं आएगी ना.
Yeah.
It happens only because of financial mismanagement.
Correct. And we will come to mismanagement and
जी.
what to look out for in a bit.
जी.
लेकिन मैंने देखा है बैलेंस शीट में एक और वर्ड बहुत रेकरेंट तरीके से आता रहता है, which is goodwill. Goodwill का मतलब क्या होता है? Because पर्सनल लाइफ में तो समझ गए कि गुडविल क्या है. एंड इज गुडविल ऑलवेज गुड या फिर बैड?
Goodwill is always bad.
Okay.
Let's put it
Amazing.
this way.
Let's start with that.
You right now, I can see, must be having huge goodwill in your organization. You are an asset for your organization. But if you prepare a personal balance sheet, how will you put goodwill over there? You can't. Nobody can put goodwill, your own goodwill in your balance sheet. कैसे quantify करोगे?
मुश्किल है.
But tomorrow, if your organization, somebody says, "Arey, Arunima is doing a great job. I want to hire Arunima or take her and pay your company some amount," तो वो गुडविल उनको मिलेगी और जिसने दी है उसकी बैलेंस शीट में आएगी.
ओ, तो अपना गुडविल
आपका गुडविल कभी नहीं. So your balance sheet can never have your goodwill. Point is, आप खुद की गुडविल क्वांटिफाई करने का मीनिंगलेस है ना. आप बोलो मेरी गुडविल 100 करोड़ है. But what meaning does that number have?
Yeah.
If everybody is allowed to capture their own goodwill, हमारी सबकी balance sheet will get inflated no end with meaningless numbers.
मेरा नेटवर्थ है 1000 CR.
So goodwill वो आएगी आपके लिए जो somebody is willing to put his money where his mouth is. अब ये goodwill आपको अगर मिली भी तो भी आपकी बैलेंस शीट में नहीं आएगी, जिसने दी उसकी बैलेंस शीट में आएगी.
मर्जर्स एंड एक्विजिशंस के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में.
हाँ, तो when you agree on a goodwill or a valuation or something, whenever you pay somebody, if I tell you this cup की value 100 रुपए है, नहीं, but I want 150 रुपया. So if you pay me 150 for a 100 rupee cup, that 50 is for goodwill. Anything that you pay over and above the book value is goodwill.
Understood. ये acquirer के बुक में जाता है. Acquiring.
Because asset is what you pay for.
Correct.
Liability is what you receive.
Yes.
So it will go to the books of the acquirer. And why do you say it's a bad item? उसकी कोई resale value नहीं है. When this company sells, they'll have to sell the goodwill they've generated for themselves. And therefore, the earlier you write it off, the better.
Yeah.
If your balance sheet has a building worth 10 crores, it can be sold. If your balance sheet has goodwill worth 10-20 crores, उसकी कोई value नहीं होगी unless somebody else is willing to pay for it.
Got it. One interesting thing जो आपने mention किया था, which was financial mismanagement.
हाँ जी.
And ये बहुत बार companies के downfall का main reason होता है.
95% से ज्यादा दुनिया में the businesses that fail, they fail due to financial mismanagement.
Right. As someone who has just entered the stock market and हमें समझना है कि कंपनी में mismanagement के chances क्या है, तो हमें क्या ढूंढना चाहिए बैलेंस शीट में टू बी एबल टू सी दूर से कि हाँ, these are the things I need to look out for, these are the key monitorables.
So I've always said the biggest pitfall is, the biggest reason for business failure due to financial mismanagement is when companies use short-term money to acquire long-term assets. It is suicidal and they don't realize. And sometimes even if you realize, it will happen because you don't have the data. Data doesn't get generated on time. If it gets generated on time, it doesn't reach the right people. If it reaches the right people, those people are not trained to read. आपने बोला ना, why should you learn how to read balance sheets. If they don't know how to read that MIS report, then they still don't know they are committing blunders.
What are some other reasons?
Too much focus on top line, forgetting that business is not about top line, it's about bottom line. Even if you understand bottom line ki importance, not understanding that profit and money are two different things. Profitability management is important. Equally important is cash flow management. All these are reasons why companies get into trouble.
That's a very key thing जो आपने mention किया है कि प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी तो एक जगह है, कैश फ्लो मैनेजमेंट भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. इस पे थोड़ा मैं डबल क्लिक करती हूँ. व्हाई इज इट सो इम्पोर्टेंट? व्हाट आर द प्रॉब्लम्स जो कंपनीज फेस कर सकती है और जो इन्वेस्टर्स फेस कर सकते हैं बाय लुकिंग एट ओके इसका नेट प्रॉफिट इतना ही है लेकिन कैश फ्लो नहीं देखा हमने.
कैश फ्लो नहीं होगा तो लॉट ऑफ पीपल विल बी डिसग्रंटल्ड. आप प्रॉफिट बना रहे हो, सैलरी देने को पैसा नहीं है, तो हाउ विल यू रन योर बिजनेस? सो यू गॉट टू एंटिसिपेट द नीड फॉर मनी. सैलरी तो मैंने इजीएस्ट एग्जांपल दिया. बड़ी बड़ी रिक्वायरमेंट्स होती हैं, कमिटमेंट्स होती हैं. अनलेस यू नो व्हाट financial commitments are, and unless you make sure timely cash flow happens to meet those commitments, the business is bound to get into trouble. See, these are such obvious things, but these obvious things most people don't understand, because you should generate data at the right time, and you should know how to read and interpret that data. This is the language of business. The financial statements are giving you messages. You are not able to receive those messages, and therefore literacy is important.
Maybe we'll take a step back here to explain to the audience what do you mean by cash flow problems and किस type के situations ये हो सकते हैं.
बैंक से लोन लिया, रिटर्न करना है, टाइम पे पैसा नहीं है. You can't service your debt. You can't pay your vendors on time. Anywhere, if you need money and you don't have on time, that is cash mismanagement. Every company should have a very robust budgeting system. You should do projected cash flow statement. You should know कब कितने पैसे की जरूरत होने वाली है. और अगर normal operation से नहीं आ रहा, if you need to borrow, then the process of borrowing also has to start a few weeks, a few months earlier. Because if you realize you are in a cash crunch situation after the crunch has happened, and then you start the process, obviously some people will not get that money on time.
What do you think about those companies that are profitable on paper लेकिन they are not able to generate cash flows? That is one side. लेकिन newly listed companies जैसे Zomato हो गया या Delivery हो गए, उनका situation बिल्कुल
उल्टा है, because they've raised a huge amount of money, so they'll be sitting on cash flows.
So as an investor, like how should I go about looking at it on a case by case basis?
See, वो less is bad, more is worse का है. Here there'll be more for a while, but I'm sure they've raised money through an IPO with a plan in mind. It is only a temporary situation. As that plan unfolds, the money will get deployed. You raise 1,000 crores through an IPO, you can't spend it the next day. It may take you not only a few weeks, it may take you several months. In the interim period, you're sitting on cash. So now the question is what to do with that. Maybe temporary investment somewhere and so on.
एक commonly asked question जो हमने comment section में देखा है वो ये है कि working capital versus cash conversion cycle में क्या अंतर है, क्योंकि 100 करोड़ के working capital से एक company is able to get a turnover of 150 CR in their books, but at the same time some other company is showing 400 CR.
So it all depends on how many times you rotate that money, ना? जितनी जल्दी rotate करोगे उतनी number of cycles आप generate करोगे. 100 करोड़ का 150 करोड़ टर्नओवर हो सकता है अगर आप 1.5 साइकिल करोगे.
Okay.
If you can manage 2 cycles, 200 करोड़ हो जाएगा. If you manage 10 cycles, 100 करोड़ डाल के 1000 करोड़ का टर्नओवर हो जाएगा. People focus on increasing sales to increase profit. Very often I tell them, वो छोड़ के पहले focus on improving your finance management, improve your working capital cycle.
What are some key ways in which a company can improve their working capital cycle that we should know as investors?
You got to go deep into the company's operations.
Okay.
So this is a message for the company itself. And if the company improves these things, the investor will automatically benefit. Inventory should be the right quantity. Less is bad, more is worse. कम रखोगे तो ऑर्डर्स एग्जीक्यूट नहीं होंगे, ज्यादा रखोगे तो इट बिकम मोर. उसका क्राइम क्या है? देन इट गोज इनटू प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस. हाउ लॉन्ग डू यू टेक टू कन्वर्ट रॉ मटेरियल टू फिनिश प्रोडक्ट? उसको शॉर्टन कर सकते हो क्या? फिनिश गुड्स इन्वेंट्री कितनी रखते हो? कस्टमर को क्रेडिट कितना देते हो? कलेक्शन कैसा है? एट एवरी लेवल देयर इज स्कोप फॉर इम्प्रूवमेंट, एंड इफ यू स्टार्ट इम्प्रूविंग योर साइकिल बिकम शॉर्ट.
Negative cash conversion cycle भी मैंने देखा है in companies like DMart. What they do is that they take money upfront and suppliers को बाद में पे करते हैं. As a result of that, they have a certain lead time.
जो भी खरीदते हैं क्रेडिट पे खरीदते हैं और कस्टमर ऑन द वे आउट कैश देके जाता है. बट दिस साउंड्स वेरी नाइस, बट इट कैन लीड टू सिवियर प्रॉब्लम्स.
अच्छा.
Unless finance management is good. This is precisely the kind of company that can become guilty of using short-term money for long-term purposes. This money that has come in upfront is a short-term source. It's a current asset में आता है. ये आपका नहीं है. आज extra है, मगर 60-90 day के बाद वो vendor को देना है. But you're sitting on cash. And if you happen to be a nice growing company, then your need for fixed assets will always be there. There is, on the one hand, your growth is stuck because of shortage of money. On the other hand, you're sitting on money. Do you think they won't use it? They'll probably definitely use it. There was a company called Subiksha, got into deep trouble, finished precisely due to this reason. But DMart, Mr. Damani is a very, very smart man, very intelligent person. I think he would probably understand these things better than anybody else.
Another key metric that investors often use is return on capital employed. उसपे what is your take and how much?
That's the ultimate test.
अच्छा.
कितना पैसा डाला, कितना कमाया. Ultimate test वही है. एक कंपनी 100 करोड़ टर्नओवर करती है, दूसरी 200 करोड़ करती है. Which is better company? Somebody might say 200 वाली. Okay, I'll tell you profit कितना है. वो 100 करोड़ वाली का profit है 40 करोड़. 200 वाली का profit है 60 करोड़. Now you realize पहली वाली अच्छी है. Then I tell you पैसा कितना डाला था. दोनों ने 100 करोड़ डाला और सपोज पहले वाले ने 100 करोड़ डाल के 40 करोड़ कमाया, दूसरे वाले ने 60 करोड़ डाल के 60 करोड़ कमाया. Ultimate test is how much money did you invest and how much did you earn. Return on capital employed second company का better.
To start one's fundamental analysis journey, वो क्या resources है that people can use to study balance sheets better या उनको better समझना है तो top 3 resources that आप advise करेंगे?
Fundamental के लिए आपको P&L भी पढ़ना पड़ेगा. Balance sheet and P&L, preferably cash flow also. Now, balance sheet tells you where the money has come from, where it has gone. आता दो जगह से है, owners contribute and outsiders contribute. जाता दो जगह में है, to create infrastructure and to supply the working capital. Your sources, as I said earlier, can be classified into two types, long term and short. And utilization can be classified into two types, long term and short term. One simple technique is to work out what is known as the current ratio. Short-term uses on the asset side are called current assets. Short-term sources on the liability side are called current liabilities. And the ratio between current assets and current liabilities is called the current ratio. वो हमेशा positive होना चाहिए. CA should be higher than CL. Norm is 2:1 होना चाहिए. In case वो less than 1 है, I think that would be a big, big red flag.
Red flag. Speaking of red flags, there are certain companies, जैसे Ather का एग्जाम्पल ले लेते हैं, जहाँ पे रेवेन्यूज बढ़ रहे हैं लेकिन एट द सेम टाइम नेट प्रॉफिट देखते हो तो इट्स स्टिल लॉस मेकिंग, क्योंकि मार्जिन्स प्ले अ बिग रोल. फ्रॉम एन इन्वेस्टर पीओवी, मार्जिन्स को देख के क्या ध्यान में रखना?
If you're going to judge a company by its sales growth, then sales तो कोई भी बढ़ा सकता है. अगर मैं 100 रुपए की चीज बेच रहा हूँ, कल बोलूँ 50 में देता हूँ, तो लोग will flood. So I don't want any sales, and therefore margins are important. A company whose sales is growing and the margins are growing proportionately, then it tells you genuine sales. Okay. But if sales are going up and margins are dropping, that shows you're just garnering sales, but that doesn't help. As a temporary measure, maybe you're trying to achieve something, alag baat hai. But as a consistent, you can't. You'll fold up sooner or later, na?
Is that why in an interview you'd mentioned कि operating profits is ज़्यादा important as net profit?
Yeah, operating profit is profit arrived at by minusing operating costs from revenue. मगर नॉन ऑपरेटिंग कॉस्ट भी होते हैं, और जो नॉन ऑपरेटिंग कॉस्ट भी माइनस करेंगे तो नेट प्रॉफिट आ जाता है. एंड आई हैव सेड नेट प्रॉफिट को हम बॉटम लाइन बोलते हैं. आई सेड बॉटम लाइन से ज्यादा जरूरी एक सेमी बॉटम लाइन है जिसको ऑपरेटिंग प्रॉफिट बोलते हैं. नाउ व्हाई इज दैट इंपॉर्टेंट? बिकॉज योर बिजनेस इज ऑल अबाउट योर कोर एक्टिविटी ना. अगर आप सेल करके जो आपका जो रेवेन्यू जनरेट होता है, आपकी कॉस्ट आर मोर देन दैट एंड यू हैव अ ऑपरेटिंग लॉस. वो प्रॉफिट कैसे हो गया? वो बिल्डिंग बेचनी पड़ गई मुझे, उसमें प्रॉफिट हो गया, एंड बॉटम लाइन इज प्लस. Doesn't help. I want to make money from my core activity because non-operating items are freak items. इस साल हुए, अगले साल नहीं होंगे. Whereas operating items का एक pattern होता है. If you give me your last 5 years data, I can with reasonable accuracy project it for the next 3 years. Sometimes operating loss can be a result of tax planning. I would any day back a company which has a positive operating profit and a negative bottom line as compared to a company which has a negative operating profit and a positive bottom line. Bottom line पे purely जाओगे तो you could get misled at times.
Let's look at a case study. ठीक है, let's say there is someone who is a 25-year-old person and वो invest करना चाहते हैं around 5 lakh rupees in the stock market, but they want to understand where to invest. This is not a personal finance question, don't worry.
I stay away from personal finance these days.
The question really is कि वो कैसे वो इंडस्ट्री या कंपनी के बिजनेस प्लान को स्टडी करे so that they can make an informed decision.
Yeah, I've often said कि पहली बात तो he should first choose the industry. थोड़ा सा cursory study of business papers, reading the news, reading the budget gives you a fair idea किस industry का environment, immediate future अच्छा है. Government support कर रही है, demand supply situation favorable है, sunrise sector है. Once you choose the right industry, you have, in my opinion, eliminated 50% chance of making a loss. Then your fundamental analysis comes in when I have to choose within that industry which company to buy. So मेरा दूसरा suggestion हमेशा होता है यार अगर नवे investor हो तो stick to the names that immediately come to mind when you think of that industry. आपके well wishers phone करेंगे कभी ये ले लो मैंने भी लिया कौन सा नाम ही नहीं सुना कभी क्यों they'll give you a lot of info and थोड़ी देर चलेगा भी शायद and everybody gets vindicated because if enough people follow that advice it will go up.
Yeah.
And then when it crashes down it goes off the grid only. So don't do that unless you become a seasoned investor. And then apply a few criteria. Sales ऊपर होनी चाहिए consistently. थोड़ा पीछे जाना पड़ेगा डेटा निकालने के लिए. Like I said, gross profit should also be rising at the same pace minimum as sales. Gross profit थोड़ा भी improve हुआ ना is a big plus point. Net profit should always be rising at a rate faster than the increasing sales and gross profit. Because net profit निकालते निकालते fixed cost भी minus हो जाती है. When you have fixed cost in your costing structure, it results in what is known as a leverage effect. Leverage effect मतलब profit goes up exponentially. क्योंकि cost बढ़ेगी, अगर sale बढ़ेगी, cost बढ़ेगी, profit बढ़ेगा, same proportion में तो there's no leverage.
Correct.
But if sales is going up and some costs are fixed, costs are not going up, then profit should go up at a pace faster.
Now let's come to this book on the table.
हाँ जी.
You've recently written Start Early, Finish Rich, which is
जी.
about Gen Z money management.
It is aimed at, according to me, 12 to 20-year-olds. So I call them kids and young adults.
So take me through the thought process behind writing this book.
This is my hobby turned passion turned full-time activity. We train thousands of companies across the world. Then I realized that these large companies are the ones who pay us to teach. But there are a whole lot of people who need it as badly who can't pay. उनकी तरफ भी कुछ जिम्मेवारी है. छोटे से सोचा था बढ़ते 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 we have this project called Financial Literacy for All.
Okay.
Where our very ambitious aim is to train 1 billion Indians free of cost.
1 billion?
हाँ, but वो lifetime का project है, overnight में नहीं होने वाला.
Yeah.
And I hope year by year the percentage of my time devoted to that project will keep on increasing. Then even the large companies, clients of mine, who are maybe in their 40s, 50s, 60s, हर एक ने कभी ना कभी बोला होगा यार ये मेरे को स्कूल में क्यों नहीं सिखाया. Because then they make mistakes, then they pay a price, then they realize ये कितना important. So I thought why not address this audience. And today seeing the startup culture, youngsters शुरू हो जाते हैं, startup शुरू कर देते हैं. Now you read in the paper this kid did this startup and did so well, you feel so nice. But what we don't realize, maybe 10,000 such startups came up. A handful became successful. Many of them failed. And many of them failed due to financial mismanagement. ना कोई उनको पढ़ाता है, ना उनको समझ में आता है कि how important it is. Maximum, if he keeps an accountant, he thinks finance is taken care of, which is absolutely the wrong notion.
Yeah.
So the idea is let's reach out to kids. And if they have a nice, learn this early in life, it will help them. Nation को help होगा. क्योंकि जितनी बिजनेस डूबती हैं उतना नेशन को भी प्रॉब्लम होता है. सो इट हेल्प्स यू इंडिविजुअली, इट हेल्प्स द कंट्री, इट्स इन एवरीबॉडीज इंटरेस्ट. देयरफॉर दिस बुक वाज रिटन.
इस बुक के बारे में रिसर्च करते समय व्हाट आर things that you think Gen Z is doing wrong when it comes to money management, लेकिन at the same time what is it that they're doing right? क्योंकि I know कि online तो Gen Z को काफी trolling तो मिलती है.
The Gen Z is doing hell of a lot of right. I've never seen this kind of interest in stock markets. I've never seen this kind of awareness. I think we underestimate their intelligence.
For real.
I think this generation is far more intelligent than our generation. And of course, they have the added advantage. Information is at their fingertips. जो पहले नहीं होती थी.
Yeah.
What I don't like is they talk about how can I retire early. Why?
Fire,
Why?
fire, fire.
You're not working only for money. Working is a reward by itself.
Yeah.
Why do you want to get out? The moment somebody says, I want to get out, means you're dreading your work. I feel sorry for you. Please choose work which you enjoy, which is a reward by itself. Then money should be a byproduct. I hope I don't retire ever. I want to die with my boots on. What is retirement? I mean, if you enjoy so much, why should I say I must stop enjoying now? It's time to retire. Why?
Right.
So that is the only thing that worries me.
On that note, thank you so much for your time, Dr.
Such a pleasure talking to you.
तो ये था बैलेंस शीट की बेसिक्स का परफेक्ट इंट्रो। मनी टॉक्स पे ग्रो पे और कौन से कॉन्सेप्ट्स ले आए और कौन सी गेस्ट को होस्ट करे, हमारे साथ कमेंट्स के जरूर शेयर करें। दिस इज अरुणिमा राव साइनिंग ऑफ। मिलते हैं अगली बार।
Investment in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing. Please read the risk disclosure documents carefully before investing in equity shares, derivatives, mutual fund, and or other instruments traded on the stock exchanges.